Hello, this is Professor Kim Nelson with the Jewelry Design Department at the Fashion Institute of Technology. This will be my final installment of rendering demonstrations. This is a rendering tutorial basically on how I paint quickly, how I paint professionally. This will help pull together some of the elements that you've seen in the other tutorials. Those tutorials, however, were based on how to do things in an ideal situation and at fairly large scale. The domes, the cylinders, the flower approach, those things are quite large and had a lot of area that needed to be filled in with interest or relevant detail. These are a professional project I'm working on. They're small, much more typical of what you would be working with on a day-to-day basis, and I do not have the luxury when I work professionally to lavish a lot of time and detail on a rendering. These should take me, I'm going to do two of them here, they should take me between 12 and 14 minutes or so to do each one. Okay? This tutorial is being compiled for the course JD 134. Unlike the other tutorials, I am going to be rotating my canvas. As with the other tutorials, this is digital media, duplicating what you would do with gouache. And in gouache or digital media, I have a very hard time drawing straight up and down. I did it in the other tutorials because they would make more sense to you that way. I figure you can follow along with me here. First thing I'll be doing is laying in the stone. I will do one with a colored stone and one with a diamond. The first one I will do with color. And I'll do a ruby. Put in a body of a base color, putting in some darks. Now I'm going to paint in the white aspects of the stone, portions of the stone. Start with doing the facets. Bring in some pavilion detail that would show through. Carry some of this faceting shape and texture around the rim of the stone. That's good enough. Now I put a glaze. And once again, like with the traditional media, you will want to follow the faceting to some degree. You want very translucent color, but you want very little water on the brush. You don't want it too dry or it'll drag the white Pro White and smear it all over the place. If you have it too wet, it'll pool and you'll have a tie-dye stone. So it's finding that that medium, the sweet spot basically, where this all works out just right. That can be a challenge. Feel free to add a few different shades of that glaze. You may have noticed I just changed how heavy the glaze was. In a computer I can do that. And reclaim, come back in with Pro White. And reclaim some of the white areas. If I see something that's not working, I have a large white patch here that I don't care for. I really don't have the time on this to dally with such things, and it would be fine to leave it alone. Unfortunately, I'm a perfectionist, so I will have to come back in here and I'm not sure why I'm having the challenge I'm having putting that line where I want it, but that'll work fine. Okay. Now I'm going to paint in the yellow. These will both be yellow gold rings. As is the usual case, I'll be filling these in with yellow ochre, or its digital equivalent. Come in with my dark. I'm emphasizing two kinds of form here at the same time, which is typical when you're rendering jewelry. I'm bringing in the cylinder. This is basically a cylinder that this forms across. So shadow, shadow, light in the middle for the cylinder, but also the relative form of this ring band as it goes around and around. Right now I'm capturing what's above and what's below, because this is a twisting, twirling sort of form that I'm working with. Okay, that's the dark. Now I'll bring in the light. And bring in my core shadows. Going to bring in my highlights. The goal of a rendering, students, is to have someone look at and be able to identify first what the materials are, and second, what the form is. Oh, and for it to sell the piece. You want it to be attractive. Okay, now I'm going to do my reflected lights. Also, any areas that I feel like that color is useful for. Okay. Now I'm going to go back and pick up the loose ends, things that I feel like need to be addressed. Last thing I would like to address is this initial shaded area I put in is a little too important. Some question as to whether if I were doing a tutorial, if I were not doing a tutorial, if I would bother with that, but fine. Okay, that is enough. Okay. Diamond accents. Putting in a base coat of gray, just like I did on the pave on the previous exercises 2 installments ago. You'll notice I'm not being terribly careful. I don't have the time. Plus, I want some of the yellow to still show through. When you do stones on yellow metal, the yellow metal affects the color of the stones. Facet my stones. Can be the most time-consuming aspect of a rendering like this. Because if the stones aren't done with thought, if you're not careful, deliberate about what you're doing, you will make ugly stones. And since the stones are the flashy sort of selling point of the rendering, sad stone rendering is counterproductive and worth mentioning, unprofessional, so your clients will not be happy with you either. Now I'm going to come in and do the beads. This is a form of pave. It's bead setting on a strip. So just like I did with the pave, this time using a dark brown, I will core shadow color. I will come in and delineate where the beads are at. Okay. And now I will paint the beads themselves. For the most part, in the highlight color, lemon yellow and white. Now there will be some beads that are in shadow that I will not use the highlight color on. I'll use a richer color. It's important to help with the form, like right here, where you have these two strips close together and overlapping. I want these beads to not be as high and bright as the others. And here, even though these are in shadow as this wraps around and could be done darker, I'm going to intentionally keep them light to keep the distinction between the overlapping and underlaying bands. You want it realistic? Yes. You want it to read even more. Now we'll come in with some of the richer colored beads. Okay. Now what I want to do is I want to put in the form of my pave, my melee. And the way I will do that is with a wash of white over the top. In areas where I want the stones, for the sake of the form, to be bright. Remember, a flat layout of just white, pasty looking stones is not nearly as dramatic as having stones be light and dark and play back and forth. And as I did in the pave example, I will come back in, and on some of those stones, not many, but some, I will make them nice white circles. like that. Now the last thing I need to do, and it is somewhat of a detail, I like to do it, it's not critical, but I do enjoy, I think it's important to do on this piece, so I'll do it, is I will put what I call rims. It's the equivalent of like a bright cut, even though this piece would likely not have a bright cut finish to the setting. I come in with the highlight gold color. And I pick up the edge. Since this isn't likely a bright cut treatment, in a bright cut I'd make a smooth line. Since this is probably cut down, I will simply pick up the light in between the beads. But I want to accentuate the edge a bit. If I see dark areas I don't like, I'll put a dot in them. It's fine that the dot is light yellow and not white if it's in between the stones or whatever, because the colors the values are close enough. And what I'm really trying to do is in the last minute here get a nice clean read of where is sparkly and diamond, where is not, what is over, what is under, what is high, what is low. And I've already devoted enough effort to making it realistic and pretty. Now I'm trying to just make sure that it reads well. Okay. Last thing I need to do is the beads on the stone. Not the beads, I'm sorry, the prongs. Hard to paint and talk at the same time. I will treat these the same way I treat the beads. I will cover them in my coarse shadow color. And then depending on how detailed I want to be with them, I can treat them in a number of ways. I will treat these, okay, a little fancier than I normally would for this size. I'll try anyway. I'll put a little bit of my light, my medium highlight color in there, and then I will come back in with my highlight color. But actually, you know what? These are going to be too small for that to even read. I mean, if they were larger, you could do multiple brush strokes to identify these, but I was wrong. I will do them the fast way after doing them the slow way, and that is to do them the same way I did the beads. Fill them in with the highlight color, except for the small outline that delineates them from the rest of the piece. Okay? And that's done. Next ring. This one will be a diamond center. So I'll lay that in first with a medium gray. Put in my shade. Come in, paint in my highlights, my facets. similarly to the colored stone. Keeping the light around the edge. Having done that, now I'm going to do, instead of a glaze on this, I will do well, it will be a glaze. It'll be a glaze of white. And I will bring that glaze starting at these darker facets and bringing it up. I don't want to lose these dark facets, so I'm trying to be careful. They're important to the final impact of the stone. Also bring some diagonal light across the table here. Okay, that's good. It's not my best I've ever done, but it will work. It reads. Of course, I'm going to try and monkey with it. I guess I'm doing a new tutorial, and I want it to look really nice. Alright, that's enough. Okay, gonna go on to the gold. Yellow ochre lay-in, as usual. Okay, now I'm going to bring in the dark. Once again, trying to capture that form of a cylinder underneath the ring. You turn the shank of a ring and you look at it from the top. You are looking at a cross-section of a cylinder. That's fine. Now I'll do the light. for shadows. Fine. Highlights. Picking out where I think the highest point of these forms would be. Alright. Reflected light. Sharpen that brush a bit. It wants to be a fat line there. Okay. And as usual, I'm not just doing reflected light, I'm doing anywhere where I think this might be a useful color that I can see as I'm moving along here. And now I'm going to finesse. Fill in the gaps. There, it's done. I'm going to come in now with the stones. Lay in the base gray. You'll notice that as I paint, I'm obliterating a lot of what I've already done. A question might arise, why did I bother painting areas in detail that I'm going to cover up with stone anyway? First, I don't paint them as incomplete a detail as I would otherwise, and second of all, it keeps me in the sense of the form of the entire piece. The stones are a surface treatment. Before I do surface treatments, I establish and create the form of the entire piece. Then I'll go back and decorate the surface. So I have done the form of the gold mounting that this ring is, and now I'm coming back and doing surface treatments. Faceting. And as I explored the form in the yellow, it gave me stronger ideas about what to do with the form of the diamonds on top, which is going to come in handy in a couple minutes here. Remember, the amount of detail of this faceting is influenced by both the size of the stone and the location. If the stone is mostly in shadow, I will not devote a whole lot of faceting to it. Okay? Now, beads. It's really one of the most important aspects of depicting stone, and I'm surprised when I see not just students but professionals choose not to do them. Just figure, those stones are held in with inspiration. Because these beads give you the opportunity to help keep the stones separated, which is much more important in gouache than it is on a computer. Because in gouache, your brushstrokes are going to do a lot more unpredictable things than my stylus is on a computer screen. Helps to reaffirm that these are individual stones. Helps to reaffirm the form. And it adds a lot of sparkle. And that's what you really want when you do pave on a surface. In metal and stone, is you want to have a completely activated surface. A surface that feels like it isn't metallic. Otherworldly, floating, glimmering, scintillating. That's the kind of surface you're going for. So if painting in a bunch of little beads helps that effect, by all means, we paint in a bunch of little beads. It's tedious, but worthwhile. Start with the beads I know are in the light, using the highlight color. Lemon yellow and pearl white. By the way, you'll notice when I'm rendering, oftentimes the beads on the inside of a curve are tinier than the beads on the outside of a curve. That's handy painting as it helps fill in the space, but it's actually also what happens in real pave layout. The setter will raise smaller beads as the stone spacing is closer on the inside of a curve, and raise fatter, larger beads on the outside to take up space. Go back and pick up the beads in the shadow. It's important you make sure you get them all, because you don't want to leave the dark blot that you created. Okay. Now I'm going to do the white glazing, the white wash, which is a thinned out whitewash, just like you were doing color. Not a lot of pigment, a bunch of water, but a fairly dry brush. Not so dry it picks up the faceting and detail you've done already, but certainly not wet enough that it sets your detail afloat and you have to repaint it. And I am doing this to establish form, so areas where the stones I feel like are going to be getting the most light is where I'll do the most white. Come back in now and pick my accent stones, the ones I want to be fully painted. When you have an over and under thing like this, that's a pretty good indication of a good place to do it. If I see gapping in the stones, I will come in and pick up with dots of white. And with my defined beads I can do that. I can actually kind of run these together a little bit, and you will still get the sense that it is individual stones created by the few crisply painted ones that we're doing, where they're just circles of white, and by the beads. And it's not just about form, always. This one here would actually not probably be fully lit, form-wise. But I did it because I wanted the interest. I wanted to have, it was feeling, you know, too much of a medium, kind of blasé. So I added a bright white stone there to add interest. Okay, now I'm going to do my rims. Once again, since these are probably cut down, the rims will really be the spaces in between the beads. I have what I consider to be an undersized stone here. I am going to bring in a bit of white, just to make it confusing. So someone can't look at that right off the bat and go, wow, you painted that stone too small. Whatever it takes. To make it read and to convey the information and for it to be attractive. Okay, fine. Now I'm going to do the prongs that are holding the center stone. Learned from the last one that there's no point at this scale to come in and try and do fancy multi-brush stroke work. I could. I'm on a computer. I can go in and put in whatever detail I want. The problem is, it's one of the downfalls of working on a computer, is that you put in detail only dogs can hear. And even if it came out in the printout, or in your case, even if you got in there with your super sharp brush and you pulled off that detail, what the likelihood is going to be is it's just going to confuse the end product. instead of looking like prongs, it'll be a fussy little mass of dots that nobody can make any sense of. You want clarity. Yes, you want detail because it makes it feel precious and pretty, but you want clarity so that the people who are looking at it know what they're looking at. Last chance to change anything I don't particularly like. And that's done. There are the finished rings. Alright, so hopefully that was helpful to you. That's how I would go about doing these in a professional way. And I will see you guys in class. Thanks for your time.